afternoon, everyone, and welcome to our April workshop on data-driven fundraising. I am Angela Beard, and I am the director of the Fundraising Academy at City University of Seattle, which is quite a mouthful, but that's who we are and proud to be it. Our mission, and it's a fabulous one, is to help nonprofits increase their fundraising capabilities, thereby increasing the impact they have in their communities and society. So we do free and low cost fundraising training throughout the state of Washington. And if you're interested in having, I'm mobile, so if you're interested in having a visit or having someone come out and speak to your team or our webinars, you can contact me at the information at the end of this, I believe. Yes, we will be emailing out the slides before we go any further. So you can look forward to that and the link to the recording as soon as it's edited. So in the next couple of days. A little more about me, if you'd like to know. I have more than 20 years in fundraising before I went into academia, and I've been teaching for nearly 10 years. So I get to do and teach. I'm going to leave the negative sayings about those who can't teach alone, because I can do both. And now I will exit stage left and introduce our guest speaker, Meenakshi Das, who's going to take us through some about 30 minutes of discussion or presentation about data and fundraising, and then open it up to all of your questions and answers. So without further ado, Meenakshi.
Thank you, Angela. I hope everybody can hear me okay. I am going to increase my volume and look at myself awkwardly through the screen. Good afternoon. I'm going to share my screen for the presentation. You should all receive the slide decks after the session today. Hopefully, you can see my screen. Oops. Give me 1 second, so we have it all good and nice and clean. All right, so what we are going to talk today is about how to become more data-driven in your career, in your profiles for the next role. Before I move on to that, we have Kojo with us and Angela with us and Libby, a couple of people here who are going to support me to manage the chat. And help if there are any questions before we even get to the Q&A part, which would be in 30 minutes. So I always begin with a page about me, with a window of my LinkedIn page so we can connect. I am Associate Director of Fundraising Research and Analysis at VGH UBC Hospital Foundation. I recently started with this role. I am a consultant in data science for the nonprofits, and most of my clients are based out of Seattle. So where I was up until recently, I moved to Vancouver, Canada, beautiful place. Other than doing these data works on my day job, I also love to volunteer. I'm a mentor. I do a lot of speaking sessions on inclusivity, equity, diversity in research practices. That's one of my key areas outside work that I deeply am involved in. And I hope we get to connect after the session today. So what are we doing today? What's our agenda here? So we are going to set up some outcomes. We are going to set up what are we taking the two main things from this session. Then we are going to talk over some basics. I want to talk to okay, what is the meat of this presentation? Then we would look in detail of the 3 ways that I talk in the basics. I have a little bonus section that I talk from my experience of how do you take any data picture, any data chart, any visualization and turn it into a story, something like a 5-step process that I use. It's not part of the presentation, so it's like a little extra. And then we would do the Q&A for what we came here. So what's our outcome? What I want to do today is establish a framework with you to understand two things so that when you walk away from the session, you know where do you want to go, what is missing, and how do you fill those gaps. When we think about data-oriented roles, multiple things come into our mind, whether it's from, but even if it's from the fundraising industry, which I am right now, or from my past life of when I was in the tech industry. When it comes to data roles, myriad of options come into our mind, whether it's you can be a business analyst, be a visualization specialist. The titles doesn't matter, but your intention of what your day looks like, that is what I want to achieve through this session today with you, to help you where do you want to be and how to fill those gaps. And we would revisit this outcomes page right before the end of this presentation to know, wait, did we actually achieve it? Let's see. Before I get into that, I completely forgot. We would be doing a couple of polls. So I would be looking at the chat, and Pooja can help us. And I hope, Pooja, you help us. What percentage of your current work involves working with data? You could be a working professional, a student, someone, the people you teach. How much do you work with data? You could be working extensively, or in my last option, you can see you don't work with it at all. Pooja, could you help us from the chat box if there are any options there that people are coming up with? If there are some chat options, I could see some C's, I can see some B's. Oh, another C. Well, I feel like we are this is more to establish where we are as a group. And I think we are coming with about 10 to 15% kind of a role. Okay. Well, in that case, let me take, in that case, now that we established that a little bit from our audience, from all of you, how much data you use, what is it, would you want to share, if I would ask you, any challenge when you think of if you wanted to be more data oriented in your job? What if you want to do a transition to a different job, or if you want to be in the same job, but you just want it to be more data oriented? Is there any specific challenge that you have? And I want to open the chat box here in case you want to share anything. Just in case I know we have a Q&A session to talk about it specifically, but is there any specific challenge you have felt is it more about, well, I don't know where to begin, I don't know which role to be in, anything that you may want to share at this moment while I give a couple of seconds here on the chat box for you. So we could plug that in our presentation. I like to do this kind of a live thing where I take it in the beginning. So Karen shares determining a simple high-level dashboard with key metrics is a specific challenge. Excellent question. Oh, Angela, intimidated by technology. That makes a little bit two of us. You're not alone there. Brian shares data integrity and access to reports. Great point. Yep, that's a big challenge for sure. Well, let's see a little bit in the presentation and then come back to these points. Like, what can you do in your roles to get to these points? What do you need? So let's start with the basics here. I call something RDS as a role in data space. This is a term that I use in my every volunteering, in my every teaching sessions to people who are interested to be more in the data science in the data space. I use specifically the word data space because data science is really a very broad field, and it's sometimes not, justice is not done when we try to push different titles into the data science field. So I take a step back and call it data space. Now there are some options here. There are some options of business analyst, data analyst. You can be visualization specialist. I am in fundraising in the Department of Fundraising Research and Analysis. So there are terms that can determine what you want to do in data space. But what really does it take to be in one of these roles? Well, it takes three things. What does it take to be in this, to be successful? It takes three things. You need the skills, you need the experience, and you need a network to chat, to take advices from. So when it comes to these three things together, it helps you become more successful in the data-oriented role you want to be in. Now, we are going to talk in the next 3 slides, how do you achieve each of those? Because for all of you, if you think that you want to be, for example, let's say you want to be in the fundraising research and analysis in an organization, you need to evaluate what do you need more. It could be that you don't have enough experience, or you have these skills, but you don't have a network really. So you need a proportionate, a portion of all these three aspects in your circle, in your orbit, to be successful. So what does it mean to be having skills? Let's start with that. So I start with this. Google usually defines it as the ability to do something, though, is called a skill. I say, especially keeping in mind your ability to do something, that composes your skill. How do you do it? So if you wanted to be in a more data-oriented role, let's take, Karen, you shared about dashboarding, right? Let's say you want to be in a role where you want to talk, or your day job involves more about the metrics and dashboarding. Maybe it involves, dashboards do involve a piece of visualization. So let's say you want to apply for a role of visualization specialist, or you want to move into the same organization, but more towards building dashboards and metrics. So that's your goal role, right? That's your goal role. Determine that. Give a title to it. If you're not sure of what title to be given, come up with 3 or 4 titles on what does it mean. Then collect the required skills for that from different sources. Google, Indeed, Glassdoor, Monster.com. Type your role in there and see what are the kind of job descriptions that come up there. Like, do they need more of a specific set of skill sets that you need, that you could learn? So build that list of skills. Maybe perhaps you are not sure entirely, that depending on the industry and the role, what are the skills you need. So for example, when I say I'm in fundraising research and analysis, that requires a specific set of skills when it compares into, if I would become a business analyst in tech industry, that requires a different kind of skill set. So use Google, Indeed, and Glassdoor to research on your goal role and get those skill sets. Now create a list of your skills that you already have. Most often we are usually used to using Excel in our day-to-day work. We use this Excel spreadsheet extensively, and that still is relevant for even any kind of a data space role, like even in fundraising, or even if I would want to do a very heavy analytics, that's a basic skill. So build a list of all those things that you usually do when it comes to data. Maybe there are things that you might already find that you are in this second role, when you compare it, you might see that you are already doing 25% of it. Once you know what is missing, you know what you need to do. You know what is the gap to get you there. And then this is my go-to source. I literally go to Udemy, Coursera, DataCamp, where I have learned my skills for my data-oriented goals, whether it was in the tech industry or whether it's in my current fundraising industry, whether it's consulting or non-consulting. These are the sources I go to when I need to fill up the gaps in my skills. One thing that I would add as someone who's a heavy user of these websites is Udemy offers a lot of discounts and options during any major public holidays. So take advantage of that. I usually build a list like, okay, this year in next quarter, I need to learn a little bit of X, Y, and Z skill, or I need to know a little bit more of advanced Excel. And so I would keep a list of it. And when a big public holiday comes up, let's say 4th of July, I would go on Udemy, and around it, these $200 kind of courses would be at like $15 to $20. So that would be an amazing time for me to like book a couple of them, and then they're self-paced and you could learn it throughout the year. That is for the skill. Now I said that there are 3 aspects, right? The next one is by experience. This is something that you may or may not have already. So how do you build a skill or an experience if you don't have it already? Well, you could have the professional experience, which is directly coming from your job right now. So for example, if you are building the dashboard, going back to the example again, if you're building the dashboard, if your current role allows you to have the space to build that, that is giving you the experience to bring your role into a more data-oriented space, right? But what if your current role only has 10 to 15% of the time working with data? You don't work so much with data. Then you have other options. You have volunteering and you have independent projects. These are the 2 places where I tell in my teaching sessions that if your current job does not involve working with data as much, use the second or the third bucket. Go through volunteering. There are local groups in your city that comes up and work on data. One of the places to find such groups would be the meetup groups. Once you have identified from the last slide, the goal role that you want in the data space, go to Meetup and find people like, for example, advanced Excel users in fundraising industry in Seattle. That's like one example. And you would come up with several Meetup groups, volunteer with them. You would get an exposure of not only talking to people, leveraging a network, but also putting your skills that you are learning to use without having the pressure that it's part of your regular job. And independent projects is another amazing way where you can put your skills to test. So one of the ways you can find independent projects is through, again, going back to Udemy. It offers several options to do your independent projects. You could literally search for independent projects in Excel, for example, or you could go on LinkedIn, which gives us a good segue to the next way, or the third slide of this trio. Let's go to that. How do you do independent projects using your network? So you could do the third thing that you need to be successful in your data-oriented role is your network, the group of people who you could leverage for their advice or their experiences in being successful in your own role. So networking can be done within your org and outside your org. And I want to show the whole slide before I talk. So let me share an example specifically to networking. So from my background, I have my education in computer science. I have most of my work experience in the field of computers and tech industry. And I moved to fundraising about 4 years ago. So even though the skills, which we saw 2 slides before, and the experience, a slide before, that existed in my portfolio, there wasn't a network in the fundraising industry when I transitioned from the tech industry to the fundraising industry. So this was the third way that was needed for me to feel and be successful in this industry. So where did I start? When I started in the fundraising industry, started within my organization here on the left corner. I started to talk to people, those frontline fundraisers, people the consultants who are responsible for directly the major gifts, annual giving, events. I started to talk to them. What does it mean to be in their shoes? What does their day-to-day looks like? Not just thinking from in terms of the data point of view, but data is really your conversation starter. So to be in a data-driven role doesn't mean you need to only learn about data. You need to know about the people who would be using your data, who would be using your research, who would be using your analysis. So I started to network with those fundraisers. Now you may think that the networking only means to be talking to other data analysis people of the fundraising industry, but I wanted to talk to people who are not necessarily involved in analysis at all, or who are involved in data at all, like just to know what it means, how do they consume that data. Once I was comfortable within my organization, I started to branch out. I started to go outside my organization. And the three ways that you can see here is LinkedIn, professional memberships, and the groups. This is where that independent project that I talked about in the last slide comes up. LinkedIn, professional memberships, and meetup. That helped me a lot to pick up a few independent projects down the way. So there were a couple of small shops, small nonprofits in Midwest US or in Seattle, in Portland, who came up with like, hey, Meena, can we talk about this little segmentation piece coming up for the giving day by the end of November? They said, hey, why not? Let's do that. And that gave me a lot of exposure just to learn about, to see different ways in which nonprofit fundraisers operate. In general, how do they talk to donors? Especially in the COVID times, this whole slide of networking helped me to be more successful in my own personal career point of view. So those three helps immensely when you're trying to be in a more data-oriented role. I want to take a pause here and see if there are any things on the chat that we may want to know.
It's always hard not to interrupt, right? So there's a question: if I need someone to help with data in my own organization, would your suggestions also work, like meetup groups?
Absolutely. Great question. Absolutely. There are people in the meetup groups who are specifically interested to work with you as part of their internships, or as part of their independent consulting, or as part of representatives of their own organizations, the broader organization. So if you want any sort of help with your data in your organization, absolutely, network is one of the ways that you can leverage.
Do you have, I'm just going to keep referring to the chat box. Mm-hmm. There were several comments about the barriers to becoming more data oriented. Mm-hmm. And could we go over them and kind of see your suggestions? You're the professional here, so I'm not even going to put words in your mouth. But if one is trying to be more data oriented for one's own current role, mm-hmm. how do we determine key metrics for a dashboard? How do we get over, and this is one I'm very curious about, how do we deal with a messy database? I've gone into many organizations as a new employee, a development director or executive director, and the database is a mess. And it's been very difficult to figure out how to keep going forward and cleaning up, 2 to 5 to however many years of messy data, and doing a kind of a not as good of a job until that's taken care of. So that's a lot, but I'd love to hear what you have to say about that.
Absolutely. These are great questions. So I want to talk to the two pieces that you mentioned. One is the how do you think about the dashboard with the metrics? And the second one is, how do you deal with those messy databases, which, I'm with you. In my current job, we have a really messy database. So let me talk to you back again on these three ways. Let me go to this. Yeah. So this little chart over here, this little diagram over here, this is what I would refer to you. So let's say you wanted to build a dashboard and you want to look for key metrics. Now, I want you to think about, and I know that I mentioned about a role in data space, but you are in your current role, and this is equally applicable for that too. So if you want to build a dashboard for some metrics, let's say you are building a dashboard to evaluate how inclusive and equitable your research practices are. Let's say, or you have let's take an even simpler example. You want to build a dashboard for your major gifts portfolio. And I'm bringing up examples from my fundraising experience. It may or may not be just as relevant in the example, but consider that a dashboard for what you're needing. Now that you know it, and if you are yourself responsible for building that dashboard, first of all, know that if you have someone else to help you with, or you are yourself building. If you are yourself doing it, you can activate these three pointers here: skills, experience, and network on that project. So when you're building dashboard and metrics, what are the two key terms there? Your dashboard and your metrics relevant for your industry. So I'm going to assume that it's for fundraising for the sake of this example. And so if you are...
We're all fundraisers on this call, so that's a perfect example.
Okay, wonderful. So if that's a perfect example, so your dashboard, you want to know for the major gifts portfolio, pipeline, your revenue, that's the kind of a dashboard that you want to build. And if you're building it yourself, what are the things you need? So pick up each of these pointers and activate them. From in terms of skills, what do you need would be more around the tactical piece, right? Like, where would you want to build it? Would it be a simple Excel thing? How many times do you want to refresh it? And I know this is like a whole different area altogether as well on what are the best practices of building dashboard. But in terms of skills, if you are doing it yourself, find out what are the things you need to build that dashboard. Where is the data coming from? Are you going to do it or refreshing the dashboard, or is someone else in your team can help you with it? Then in the experience bucket, you have amazing experience. Look from it. Look through your colleagues, and come up with those metrics. There were two keywords in that: dashboard and metrics. Dashboard came up with the tactical pieces into the skills, with the metrics in terms of what are the metrics that you really want, not just from your past looking from your last year, but also the next year from your experience in terms of the metrics. One thing that I do encourage all my fundraisers in the sessions and volunteering is, when you look for any metrics, do not simply look for the metrics that you have seen every year, over year in your entire career. Keep a portion of those, looking at your work a little flexible and see what does it need. So for example, 2020 pandemic gave us this huge uptick in donors in certain industries. For example, healthcare or human services, they had a huge uptick of donors. So use the current events, the things that are happening right now in the society around us, and turn that into metrics. Again, going back to it, it's more of a different session altogether. How do you think metrics? But that comes under experience. And then, of course, activate your network. Use the people. You can find them over LinkedIn. You can find, if you do not have any colleagues in your organization to help you with this project, look for meetup groups. Look for LinkedIn with people who are doing something similar. Like, look for titles like fundraising analysis, fundraising dashboards in LinkedIn. And LinkedIn search is very powerful to give you a very customized list of what you want to do. So I use LinkedIn heavily for networking in various ways. It's not just about going in with titles or finding someone with name. And again, this is altogether a different topic, but you can use LinkedIn and meetups to customize and get to the very specific question that you are looking for. So activating these three aspects on this chart can be super helpful, whether it's project-wise in your same role or whether you are moving altogether to a different role.
Yes, fabulous.
Fabulous. Okay, amazing. Wonderful. Thank you, Karen. So let's keep going, and then we are going to open up this for more Q&A and talking.
I think sorry to interrupt you, Meena. I think there was one more question about a messy database.
Oh,
We
yes.
get
Thank you
there.
for, of course, thank you for reminding me. Yes. Messy database. I would go back to the same chart of skills, experience, and network. When it comes to messy database, so let me go back and give my example in this current role. I started with this role of fundraising research and analysis in the foundation about 2-3 months ago. The foundation is currently in a phase of a transition, and we are moving from Razor's Edge to Salesforce, and it's a lot of transition and messy database, and right fits up in the alley of their question there. So what do you do? Well, if you, again, going back, if you are responsible yourself about this project, about making this project successful, take the key terms out of it and then activate those three bubbles that I show you on the chart. So right now it's messy database, right? So start with what is your database? That means if you're responsible, first of all, figure out what is the database. Let's say it is Salesforce. Great. Now start with the skills. Have you worked with Salesforce before? If not, maybe it's something that can be picked up through Udemy, through Coursera. That's the skills portion of it. Then comes the experience portion of it. Going back to the question, have you worked with Salesforce before? Nope. So in that case, could like go back here. If you don't have the professional experience, you could pick up a volunteering, you could do an independent project. It also depends a lot on your specific project type. So when it comes to messy database, my recommendation to learn about that database would be through volunteering if it's not coming through professional. So you can meet your local meetup groups and Salesforce and fundraising and start from there and volunteer with them to learn, because most often these databases have a very wide, broad feature set that they say, hey, it's very flexible. You could use it in 100 different ways. That is not super helpful when you are trying to navigate through messy data. So volunteering helps you to hear the stories from other people. What are the challenges they're facing? How are they managing it? So that would be your second way to activate the second bubble, how you can activate it. And then definitely network with your professional memberships, for example, local AFP. If not local AFP, talk to other organizations who share the same mission as yours, or same interest as yours, same passion as yours over LinkedIn. If it's outside your organization, and collaborate with them. One of the things that I'm really proud to be doing outside my work is collaborating with a few alumni directors and how the alumni engagement scores can be calculated. And that project came all together through LinkedIn. They had messy data in their organization and no clue about how to bring this component of equity and inclusivity when talking to alumni of color. And what do you do about it? How do you look at that aspect in a data-driven way? And that project altogether came through LinkedIn. So it's a powerful tool. Use these mechanisms to answer your day-to-day data challenges. Break it up. So use the words, break them into the component. What does it really need? And then use each of these slides for those skills, experience, and network. Did I answer that question? Is there?
Good, thanks. So fabulous, Meena. Thank you.
Wonderful. Okay, let's move. So this is the slide that I was clumsily getting on and then going back multiple times. So these are the little bonus that I usually do. These are the five things you can see on the left side. How I prepare a chart. How do you have this big Excel spreadsheet of tons of numbers on there? How do you turn it into a chart? And I have a little link to an interactive workbook that I have created. And once you have this PDF with you, feel free to play with it. So just very briefly, what are these 5 points? How do I make it? So when I look at an Excel spreadsheet of data, I start with, okay, who am I making this chart for? Are they really data oriented? Are they coming from data teams? Or are they more of leadership team members who are more involved in donor relationships or marketing and communication relationships with the donors and really don't have to deal with data so much? So I start from there and pick up a kind of a chart that most resonates with how I translate my data into insights for that audience. Then once I have decided who my or determined who my audience is, I choose the visual accordingly. A simple visual, the better it is to communicate your ideas. And then the last 3 points is really about once, so Excel or any software that you use for building charts is automatically, you would know that it would automatically build some charts for you. But what you can do to make it more effective is making sure that, okay, how many groups am I trying to show on my chart? How many clusters? How many colors? How many numbers am I trying to show on my chart? Is it too busy? Can I bring it down to really focus on like 2 key things out of this chart for my audience? And then use that chart to guide the conversation. Your charts or any data related thing that you do is not the end in our work. Our work is really to start a conversation after we have worked on that data. So use your charts to guide and initiate a conversation. That's a little bit of bonus thing, that a formula that I use. So we are kind of on time. Our outcomes, this is what we wanted to do. We wanted to know what is missing from our current experience to become a little bit more data oriented and to know how to fill those gaps. It is through your skills, experience, and network. You can approach these 3 things either the point of view of you're transitioning in industry and becoming more data oriented, or you are in the same industry but just changing jobs and becoming data oriented, or altogether you are going to stay in the same role but you want your role to be more involved in working with data. So this approach of skills, experience, and network helps you to achieve any of those scenarios. That's it.
Thank you. So that was wonderful, Meena. Thank you. We're open for questions now, folks. You've got one of the top brains in the field here. Let's hear what you need to know. Everyone's digesting the information.
Yes, absolutely. I would say that it comes with a little bit of practice, I would say, of thinking in this mechanism of skills, experience, and network. Usually we aren't oriented to think in this way, right? We get into a job and things happen and we kind of get into it. But once we have decided, so this is how my entire career shaped up. I started in the I started more as a consultant in tech industry and working for the product groups, and then I moved to fundraising, and now I'm in the fundraising research and analysis. This is how it comes together, thinking through skills, a little bit of experience and a little bit of network. It makes it more specific, and your success becomes a little more achievable in a more, I would say, in a lake way. I think we have a question.
Yes. So the question is, what's your preferred fundraising database tool? Salesforce, Razor's Edge, etc. And I would add, and why?
That's a great question. So I have worked with a couple of different databases, and I would say I don't have one preferred fundraising database there, and I would say that it really depends on your needs. So the foundation where I'm working right now, they used to have Razor's Edge for almost 40 years, or whenever Razor's Edge came out, like for the all these years your organization has been using Razor's Edge. We are moving to Salesforce now because there is a need for more customizations in the way the fundraising operations are changing. So I would say that the more than the database, what is really important is what is your need? What's the business needs? What do you need in terms of your building relationships? And number two, for all the people that are there in your organization, how effectively are they communicating with the database? So going back to the example of foundation, there are 80 members in this organization with 20 in different teams, and only 5 of them were really using that database in a effective way. Like rest of them were really using different way of coding, like major gifts were used in a different way than annual giving. So once you have determined that, that makes it easier for you to choose one single database from that point of view. And I have another, I can see Libby says, small organization, could I set up a way to track data on just Excel sheet that volunteers? Absolutely, you could. I mean, this is something that I work with outside of my work, just collaborating with the smaller organizations and helping them set up that Excel spreadsheet. Maybe today you don't need the whole big Salesforce database in that aspect. All you need is an Excel spreadsheet. The more important thing than the tool is whether your data is talking to each other. So if you have a list of volunteers, it's important how are you also tracking the giving, for example, from the volunteers. One of the missing pieces in data is when your major gifts team, for example, or annual giving team, or the donors, no matter where they are, and their volunteers, that data is not talking to each other. And you have no capability from your data to know, okay, are my volunteers also donors and vice versa? That's a very key piece that sometimes gets missed. So even if you're setting up the Excel sheet, which is totally, make sure that you have that connection with the other important data sources as well. Go ahead.
I was just going to help you with a question. So many can't afford a database program. And what's the best way to track things, keeping in mind what you just said about everything needing to be relational? I'm going to use a buzzword. Woohoo.
Of course. And this is a great question again. Well, I would say in terms of the tool, Excel is fine. That's okay. But let's go back to that same chart of skills, experience, and network. If building that little bit of a map of how your different data pieces should talk to each other, if that is something that you are yourself not going to do, then I would say activate the bubble of network. Find out the people who can do that mapping for you. Really, that mapping needs is a way for your data to talk to the other pieces of your data. So if you have a volunteer Excel spreadsheet, for example, it needs to have, and I'm going to talk a little bit tactical, it needs to have a column of IDs of that volunteers, right? And then you can connect in using those IDs with your, ideally, with your major gifts or annual giving spreadsheets that, okay, these are the donors. So you need, these are some database concepts that someone who's into that mapping data can possibly help you with. So that is one of the key things where you can start with tracking your data through the Excel spreadsheet. And of course, I'm here. This is something that I love to do.
So you're in Excel, you can connect or to two spreadsheets by an ID number.
Absolutely.
And you'll
that is absolutely, Angela. That's the basic foundation, how we want to talk to different data sets. So that is what I do when I start with the new data is ask from the nonprofits, like everything, like your bio information about your constituents, your gifts file, your actions, your proposals, your pipelines, and they are all in different spreadsheets, right? And then I need to connect them in one place. That is that one common ID that is in every spreadsheet. We usually do not use names or things like that, that is repeatable. So I could also have the name Angela, you also would have the name Angela. It would be hard for Libby, if we both are donors to her organization, to know which Angela is being talked about. So a better approach would be you having a very unique ID. Let's say number 10, I'm having a unique ID number 11, and that way she only refers to us through those IDs and connects the different data from the Excel spreadsheets.
That's great. I didn't know that. Wow, thank you.
Of course.
More questions, friends.
Just so you know, I mean, this is a lot of information for 45 minutes to just take it and come up with questions. So I always make sure that I include tons of number of times that, hey, if you have any questions, this is my email address. And I also include my LinkedIn page there. So I would love to get connected with you all. If you don't have questions right now, that's completely okay and understandable. You sit with this information, digest it, and come back with your questions anytime. I usually try to keep portions of my Friday open just to meet with wonderful people of our industry and answer any questions I can, or just learn what it is to be in the shoes of fundraisers. So, questions now or later, you are very
Tomorrow's
welcome.
Friday. Okay. We'll let you folks go and ponder your lingering questions about data use and fundraising. And we do have Mina's contact information at the end of the slides, which will be sent out as soon as the video is ready. So unless there are further questions, I want to thank you all for joining us and look forward to seeing you next month. And thank you to our wonderful speaker. Thank you, Mina. That was really great and helpful. I'm sure everyone appreciates it.
Wonderful. Thank you. Thank you, Libby. Thank you, Anne. Thank you, everyone, for asking questions. Karen, love your questions, and Brian, yours too. So if you have anything more, keep them coming.
All right. Good day, everyone, and we'll see you again soon.
Bye.